Welcome to Murder by Nature, where we discuss true crime, mystery disappearances, and unsolved cases. I am your host, Jazmin Hernandez. So, as many of you know already, we skipped last Saturday. I had no time. All my minutes were used, and I was going to release the episode on Sunday, and I just couldn't do it. So I figured that we were going to skip the 1 week and we would jump right back into it. So the episode that was supposed to be released last Saturday was the episode that we're covering today, the Chicago Strangler. So this is an unsolved case. There's so many twists and turns to this and so many theories and conspiracy theories all online. And we're just going to dive into what I was able to find. And then also what we were able to find about the 51 different victims that there are. So with all of that, I want to thank you guys for coming back on this Saturday morning and jumping on with me to listen to the story and bring these victims to life and remember who they are and say their names. So with that, we are going to jump into the Chicago Strangler. Our references for today are Wikipedia, All Things Interesting, Unforgotten 51, WGN TV, Reddit, Investigation Discovery, Alex Becca Medium, and Grunge. Since 2001, at least 50 women between the ages of 18 and 58 have been murdered in a similar fashion within the city of Chicago. The victims were mostly African Americans, typically employees of sex work, and often they had a previous experience with law enforcement. Nearly all of them were strangled, partially or fully stripped, and then left in abandoned buildings, alleys, garbage bins, parks, or snowdrifts. 25 cases were closed by police, resulting in the arrest of 13 men. Many of the strangulations were committed in just 3 police districts on Chicago's South Side and West Side areas with history of violent crimes, drug use, in areas such as Washington Park and Garfield Park. These have been the most common locations for these murders to occur. This pattern, though, was recognized in 2018 through Murder Accountability Project, MAP, which reviewed over 50 unsolved strangulation cases dating back to 2001. The algorithm used by MAP sorts unsolved homicides by location, victim, and killing method to identify clusters associated with low homicide clearance rates. According to MAP, these factors could indicate an active serial killer. The Chicago police denied that any one person was behind the slayings, though. Others pointed out that there was parallels across the murders, including locations, methods, victimology, and even suggested a Chicago serial killer had been terrorizing the streets for over 2 decades. What's certain is that women are dying, and they were dying at an alarming rate, and most of their murders had not been solved. All of the women were found to be dumped after being killed in the Chicago South and West Side neighborhoods. Usually they were in abandoned buildings or alleyways. Most of the killings were done in a brutal fashion as well. Some victims were raped and beaten. Others were bound and gagged. Some women had plastic bag ties over their heads, and most were stripped of their clothing and or set on fire. Strangulation accounts for 1% of murder cases, most being domestic violence. And most of the homicides in Chicago were shootings or stabbings. They weren't strangulations. They weren't domestic violence. Random strangulations also were extremely rare, and that stood out to law enforcement because when you're thinking of a strangulation, when you're strangling someone to death, it's personal, it's intimate. You have to get in close contact with them. You have to hold them and squeeze on their neck until they just stop breathing. That is so physically, emotionally, and traumatically exhausting for someone. So you're not going to just walk down the street and find Joe and just strangle him. No, it's a crime of passion. It's a crime of heat. It's a crime that someone gets joy from at times, such as serial killers. Each of these deaths represent a unique tragedy to the families that were left behind. We're going to talk about some of the cases right now, and later we'll talk about the rest. But Angelina Ford was the earliest unsolved case. She vanished from her home after leaving to go pick up her children's report cards in 1990. She was found strangled and unconscious days after her disappearance, and she eventually ended up dying in 2001 after a year and a half of being in a coma. That is a brutal attack. Gwendolyn Williams, and I may pronounce some of these wrong, but she was the oldest of 6, and she was found murdered in 2002. On January 18, 2003, Nancy Walker missed a lunch appointment with her sister, and she was never seen alive again. Her dismembered body was found almost 2 months later, stuffed in garbage bags and dumped on the side of the road. And we will dive more into her story later down in our episode. In 2007, 2 more women were murdered within 48 hours of each other. Teresa Bunn, who was 8 months pregnant, was strangled, stripped, and thrown in a dumpster and set on fire. The next day, Hazel Lewis's body was found burning in a trash can behind an elementary school. Yet, despite the violence and frequency of these murders, very few of them received any media attention, if at all. It is said that during this time, the murder of Laci Peterson was ongoing, so Nancy Walker's case got pushed to a different page, and Laci Peterson took over. And then in 2007, they're saying that that's when the Smarts murder happened, or disappearance. Sorry if I misspoke on that one. And that got pushed. And the Cork County State Attorney, Kim Fox, she said, "You're talking about women who were thrown in trash and found in behind abandoned buildings. Horrors that were bleeps in the news, if anything at all." And that's exactly what you find. There's not much information out about any of these murders. In the recent years, however, the deaths got in a closer look, and some believed a single serial killer, the Chicago Strangler, was the one that was doing all of these murders. Thomas Haregrove, he was the founder of Murder Accountability Project, MAP. The murders in Chicago were more than a random violence, he said. They're the works of a serial killer. We know this through a series. Haregrove said, "We have no doubt." He founded MAP in 2015 after studying the serial killer of Gary Ridgway. Ridgway was a killer that killed dozens of people before he was arrested in 2001, but it took police a very long time. So to us, true crime fans, serial killers is one of the things that fascinates us. At least it fascinates me. Just the thought process of their mind and the way that their brains work and why it works that way. That's what got me into true crime and why I like it so much. But with police, they don't think of it that way. They don't have that switch in their head like, ooh, this can be one person. So with the Gary Ridgway case, it took them so long to realize that they were dealing with just one killer, just one person. And Haregrove believed that a well-tuned algorithm could help find patterns that the police weren't picking up on. And that's what he did with MAP. He used it to identify serial killers. And he believed that his algorithm would find a definite pattern in the case of the Chicago Strangler. And it did. There was one very odd pattern on the map. There was a linear array of body recovery sites near the Chicago South Side, which formed almost a perfect north to south line. This pretty much was the same line as the Chicago Green Line elevated train. So he found something, but he shared the information with the police, and neither the MAP project nor the CPD were willing to right out say that the killer used a mass transit to find and slay his victims. They didn't want to cause concern. It could be impossible to move bodies on the train, but they believed with this data point, with the usage of the data, that it should have been explored. Almost all of the victims were recovered out of the doors, often in alleyways and abandoned properties. That was pretty unusual. At least 3/4 of the victims' deaths had a clear sexual component. The victims were found partially derobed, completely nude, or parts of their clothing were ripped to expose the female form. He also said that 51 women were not killed by 51 separate men. Many of these women, probably most of these women, were killed by a man who has killed before. The nature of the crime, he killed before. Haregrove noted that the killing stopped in 2014, but then picked up again in 2017. And that suggested that his profile had either been incarcerated, was unable to kill, some form of a family lifestyle changed. And we see this in other serial killers. So this isn't the only one. If you look at numerous cases, you see that something happens. They have kids, they get married, some form of activity, some big event happens, and they stop and they go away for a few years. But then that urge comes back and we see them killing again. So the Chicago police, though, they weren't very sure, and they really didn't want to say that they had a serial killer on their hands. To the police, the evidence wasn't simply there. Investigators had collected 21 pieces of evidence from half the crime scenes, and they kept saying that the DNA is different in each case. So they didn't outright ever say that there was a serial killer. To date, just one of the 51 murders has been solved. Only one of all the 51. And that was Jazmin Turner. In 2017, a garbage collector discovered Turner's body, but the suspect wasn't taken into custody or charged with first-degree murder or anything until January of 2020. Yes, you heard that right. 2020. Police announced that she had been killed by a man that she was in a relationship with. Like the others, she had been strangled and dumped. The man accused of her murder was also a suspect in at least 2 other murders. So this is where police have to take a step back. Do they have a killer on their hands, or do they have 51 different men going and strangling people? I mean, or a woman. Do they have 51 different killers? Are you going to admit to having a serial killer that follows all the same patterns, or do you have an insane amount of people that are just out there killing people in the same pattern? It was hard to believe or hard to think because, again, strangulation is such a passionate crime. So you have 51 people that are that twisted that they're just out there strangling random women. I don't know. The Chicago Strangler could certainly be identified as a single individual, a single serial killer. Hardgrove even suggested that a man by the name of Darren Dion Van strangled multiple women in Gary, Indiana, and dumped their bodies in abandoned buildings before he was arrested in 2014. He even told police that he had killed people in Illinois. Gary, Indiana is right next to Chicago. It's even considered a part of East Chicago. So it's not totally out of the realm, but it kind of is in a way, and we're going to talk about why. So even though he is responsible for some names on the list, that's what they think. He's responsible for some of the names. The most recent murders on this list and potential victims in Chicago was in 2018. And then there was other ones after he was already in prison. So they kind of ruled him out based on that. I don't know if you should fully rule him out because you never know. Same pattern, same killing. I think he could be responsible for at least the first half of them, maybe. But that's just my speculation. In 2019, CPD's then chief detectives, Melissa Staples, said that a team of homicide detectives were with the FBI and they were going to be looking into the cases. They were assigned to the cases and they were from the Violent Crimes Task Force. They're reviewing every piece of evidence in every one of these cases. I didn't see anything kind of come from that. So I'm not going to speak more on that because as of right now, there's still no progress in these. So that is the most information that we have so far on the Chicago Strangler. There's nothing that states that they even have thought processes or people in mind. I do believe, though, for Jazmin Turner, if they have someone that they convicted, they should look at him more closely to these other cases, and they may find a link. I also believe that Darren Van may have had a potential in some of these victims. He was right there. He has the same pattern everywhere else, and he admits that he killed way more people than what he's charged with. And he was a serial killer. But just because he was in Indiana doesn't mean that he can have just came over to Chicago. Like they said, it's considered East Chicago. But with that, we're going to dive into the stories of the other women that were murdered. And I'm going to do it by year. So there's not always a ton of information on these women. So I'm going to get into what I can. And then from there, I'm just going to give the facts I know about the other people. So we're going to get started on that list, dating all the way back to 2001. As we go through this list, I may say some of these names wrong, and I'm just going to put that out there. I'm not very good when it comes to names. But in 2001, Angela Ford was found strangled in an abandoned building on January 4th. Charlotte Day was found on a vacant lot, strangled on March 28th. Winifred Shines was found in the back lot of a shop and buy clothing store, strangled on August 2nd. Brenda Coward was found strangled in a vacant lot on August 22nd. Elaine Bonita was found strangled face down on the sidewalk on November 5th. Sadia Banks was found strangled in her apartment on December 28th. In 2002, Betsy Scott was found strangled in an abandoned beauty salon on February 16th. Jody Grinsom was found strangled in an alley on August 14th. Lorraine Harris was found strangled in an alley on August 25th. Deli Jones's body was found strangled in the garage of an abandoned building on September 7th. Celeste Jackson was found strangled in an alley on December 20th. Gwynedall Williams was born the eldest of Rosa Pickrett's 6 children on October 6, 1957, in Montgomery, Alabama. Gwen and her 2 siblings moved with her mother to Cleveland, and then she moved over to Chicago in 1965. Gwen loved to dance. Her face lit up as the music and the rhythms coursed through her body and her gentle soul. She loved to cook collard greens, homemade cornbread, and Southern cuisine, including her family's delicacy chitterlings. I don't know if I said that right. Gwen always insisted that she be the one to clean with her mom, and Gwen's attention to pulling off the fat and rinsing the chitterlings. I'm guessing that's like chicken or something. I'm so sorry. If you know what that is, please put it in the comments. Of all the foreign matter next to the goodliness. Church on Sundays and several times during the week was the family's routine. Even when Gwen was grown and gone, she knew enough whenever she visited home, she had to bring her church clothes so she could attend Sunday church with her mother on the morning for worship. On Wednesday, June 12th, 2002, she was found strangled and lifeless, covered in blood. Her body had been discarded behind a dollar store in the 4800 block of North Sheridan Road. Police officials reported that Gwen's body was half-dressed and that she had drugs and alcohol in her system. Investigators also found semen and a stranger's skin beneath her nails. This was evidence that Gwen had fought. She put up a fight. She was 44 years old. Sharon is still haunted by the call from that morning from police about the news of Gwen. The night before, Gwen had been at her house caring for her as she mended from surgery, and the 2 sisters sat down watching TV and watching movies in bed, laughing. Gwen planted kisses on her sister's dogs, Princess, a Dalmatian, and it still had Gwen's red lipstick on her back white spot of her face when the phone rang for the news of her murder. 2003. Nancy Carol Walker. Closest people to her knew her as Caroline. She was the eldest of 6 sisters. Nancy was born on August 15th, 1947 in Birmingham, Alabama, on the southern red clay dirt road of a summer day. She danced most her life, including at Francis Parker High School on Chicago near the North Side, where she was a cheerleading squad captain. Dancing remained a lifelong passion that she once studied at Columbia College before deciding to carve out a career path as an entrepreneur. She attended Roosevelt University. Nancy loved hush puppies. She loved going to various restaurants and sampling different foods. She loved the step and the key of R&B where couples glide majestically across the dance floor. Maureen Walker was her sister, and she sensed that something was wrong when Nancy didn't show up for lunch with her. She said that she waited and waited and waited. She called her and she never answered her phone. She called her all evening. Again, no answer. Next day, she called. Still no answer. And that wasn't like Nancy. Indeed, the last time that her sister had heard from her was when she called on Tuesday to say that she was on her way downtown to meet her for lunch. 2 days passed and still no word. On Thursday morning, her sister sensed that it just wasn't right. Something wasn't right. But she figured that Nancy never missed a dance class that she held. Every Thursday, she would teach dance lessons to her Buddhist dance club, and she never missed it. It's something that she looked forward to. So she decided to call up the dance club to see if Nancy showed up. Nancy did not show up. Her sister said that that's when she knew something was wrong. She didn't show up for class. She started to get anxiety and feared that something happened. Maybe she fell down. Maybe she's sick. Something wasn't right. So she went to her sister's house for a well check. And when she walked into her house, she realized that Nancy hadn't been home. And she hadn't been home in a long time. They contacted the police, and the family says that the police weren't motivated to act to it. They figured that it was another run-of-the-mill, run away from your home and your life, midlife crisis kind of things. But it didn't make sense. Nancy was a businesswoman. She went to the bank that morning, and then she just disappears. Why would she go up there and just disappear? It didn't make sense to them. The cops weren't convinced, though. They thought, was it domestic? Did she have an alcohol problem? Was she into drugs? Did she owe people money? Whatever it was, they weren't taking what the family was saying serious. The cops basically said, you have to wait till Monday. Her sister said, Monday? We can't wait till Monday. See, Nancy's family had a person in like the media, we'll call them cop. That's her last name. And she knew that she had to help the family organize a press conference on the South Side. So as days passed with no word about Nancy's whereabouts, her sisters and Cobb continued to press the police and insisted that her disappearance be featured as a missing person on the police's website. They wanted the entire city to have pictures of her, and they wanted a search and rescue team. 7 weeks after Nancy disappeared, the news came on March 19, 2003. They found her, or what was left of her. She had been dismembered, and her body parts were placed in a trash bag and left on the Busham Hop Ford Freeway. She was 55 years old. Terracotta Jones was strangled in the basement of an abandoned building on May 20th. Linda Green was found strangled in an alley on May 20th. Rosita Barquito was located strangled in an alley on August 14th. LaTanya Keeler's body was found strangled in the garbage can on August 16th. Latricia Hall was found strangled in a vacant lot on October 15th. Lucy Set Mary Thomas, Mary's, I think, is like her name, but she went by Lucy Set. Her body was found in a garage of an abandoned building on October 15th. She had been strangled, but she also had a blunt force trauma to the head. Altha Emerson was found on December 26th on the second floor of an abandoned building. She was strangled and had blunt force trauma to her head. In 2004, Michelle Danforth's body was found in a trash can, strangled on July 15th. Tamala Edwards was found strangled in an alley on October 16th. McAlavan, I know I'm saying that name wrong. It's Makallavah Williams. Her body was found strangled behind Wood Brothers stamping seal on November 5th. In 2005, Precious Smith was found strangled in an alley on January 13th. Denise Torres was located strangled in an alley on February 1st. Juanita Hall was found strangled on a vacant lot on August 30th. Yvette Mason was found strangled in an alley on December 25th. Shanna Quinn Williams' body was found in an abandoned building, strangled on December 30th. 2006. Antoinette Simmons' body was found in a city trash container on July 4th. Simmons had been strangled and she had a plastic bag over her head. Kelly Scharf was found strangled in an abandoned building on September 24th. Margaret Gomez, on January 12, 2006, was found dead, partially clothed in a savage yard in the block of 4200 Knox Avenue in the city's south side. In 2007, Veronica Fraser was found strangled in an alley on March 25th. Mary Shawowski was found strangled in an enclosed porch on May 2nd. Teresa Bum was found strangled to death in a trash bin near the Southside Washington Park. Her body was nude and badly burnt on November 12, 2007. 2008, one person was strangled in a wooded area on the 9th of October, Genevicia Jenny Mellons. In 2009, Charlene Miller was found strangled in her apartment on June 13th. Latoya Banks was found in an alley on July 15th. Shanann Williams was found strangled in an alley on August 6th. Vanessa Rajokovic, totally said that wrong. Her body was found next to the river. She was strangled and found with a plastic bag over her head. In 2010, LaFonda Sue Williams was found strangled on June 15th. Quanda C. Kreider was found strangled with blunt force trauma at the first closet door of an abandoned building on July 16th. In 2011, 2012, 2014, 2017, only one person was dead that year. Well, one person a year. Angeline Prophet was found strangled in a vacant lot on August 28, 2011. Pamela Wilson was found strangled on a greasy grass area of a vacant lot on August 9, 2012. Velma Howard was found strangled in an alley on February 21st, 2014. And Catherine Buchanan was found strangled in a parkway on June 22nd, 2017. As we go into 2018, this is where they start to kind of slow down. There's still quite a bit, but they slow down. And then after this, there's no record of any other woman. In 2018, Valerie Mary Jackson was found strangled in a yard on March 17th. Lorda Dawn Harbin's body was located in a grassy area of an abandoned residence on March 25th. Nicole Ridge was found strangled in a garage of an abandoned building on June 12th. Now, I'm going to say this name wrong, and I'm very sorry. Shaniqua, Shantiiya Smith. She was 26 years old. The mother of a 6-year-old was found murdered in 2018. Smith's body was found badly decomposed beneath a car in an abandoned Chicago garage on the city's west side. So unidentifiable only by dental records could prove who she was. According to Smith's autopsy report, her body went undiscovered for about a week. Extreme tissue loss and even evidence of maggots were reported in the examination. The only substance in her system was traces of nicotine and alcohol. Smith's likely cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head and neck. Her body was left to decompose underneath a car. The coroner's final conclusion was homicide. Reno Renee Holford. Some of her friends knew her as Chocolate. Some of them called her Auntie. Her brother, which was her cousin, he was 32. He called her his sister, although they were cousins. Rena was the first girl in the family, and Ricardo was the first boy. This meant the family doted over them both, showing unrelenting affection. Her aunt, Ricardo's mother, even marked Reno's arrival with a tattoo on her arm. Reno grew up in the South Side Inglewood neighborhood, and though she grew older with the ride of the train with her cousins to explore the city. She liked to sing, and back in 1993, when Sister Act 2 came out, she would pause the VHS and sing all of the songs, serenading her cousins. Her body was discovered on September 10, 2018. A brief Chicago Sun-Times story reported in the part at 11:27 a.m., September 10th, a Chicago street and sanitation worker was dumping a garbage can into the garbage truck when he saw the woman's body among the dumped garbage on the block of 500 West 95th Street, according to the Chicago police and the Cork County Medical Examiner Office. But it was much clearer. She was murdered, discarded as trash. Her family never got to hold a funeral, touch a casket, or have a proper farewell because her body was so badly decomposed that she had to be cremated. That is all of the stories that we have right now of the women that were strangled in Chicago. I know that's a lot. I know I said some words wrong. I stepped over my words a little bit there too. Some of those stories are so horrendous that it just makes you sit back and think, what the hell? I'm sure that there's probably more out there, and I'm sure that there's things that people haven't found or haven't been put together. But those are the victims of the Chicago Strangler. Whether it's one man or multiple men or women or whoever, all those women have died in that period of time, and their cases have gone unsolved. And their stories were disregarded in the media. No one knew about them unless they're a family. And their family has had to continuously fight for justice. My thoughts on all of this is there's so many things within each of these stories that it makes it seem like it's one person. It makes it seem like it's a serial killer. When you listen they had garbage bags, or maybe even 3 people, because there's the garbage bags, there's the blunt force trauma, but the strangulation. I don't believe that 51 different people did this, and it was all different acts within years of time. I believe that this was 1 or 3 people that ended up killing all of these beautiful women and taking them away from their families. That is my thoughts on this case. And leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you guys think of this, because this one had my mind thinking. That brings us to the end of this episode. As always, thank you for listening to Murder by Nature. If you enjoyed our show, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any streaming platform that you're on. We have 15 different countries listening in. So thank you guys. I would definitely not still be doing this if it wasn't for you guys coming back and listening. It makes me so excited when I jump on and I see all the analytics. I'm like, oh my God, people actually want to listen to this. So thank you. I'm glad that you guys enjoyed this, and I'm glad that we're able to bring these victims to life and speak about their story and their life and what happened, and make sure that they don't go unforgotten. But make sure you come back next Saturday for our new episode. Until then, I am your host, Jazmin Hernandez. Don't forget to stay safe. Don't get murdered or murder people, you lovely humans. Have a wonderful Saturday.